This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports. Good morning, everyone. I jumped in the gun a little bit there. Welcome to the Mac and Jack Sports Debate Show. Missing Dr. Paul today. He'll be back next week. And producing the show today is the Philly sports guy. Brought us all in, made sure we got up and ready to go too. So good morning, everyone. Good morning, guys. You ready to get this debate on and going?
I'm good to go. Live from beautiful, rainy Pittsburgh.
All right. Yes. Out there covering the Phillies, the sports guy all over the Philadelphia sports scene. So, guys, back when football was really football, there was one thing they were concerned about, and that was winning football games. They really didn't care about stats as much as they do today. Maybe Terry Bradshaw, Joe Namath, even Eli Manning. If you look at his overall record, he's pretty much 500. But he won 2 Super Bowls with the Giants. And of course, Joe Namath won one of the biggest Super Bowls of all time. So we tend today to look at stats, and we can slant stats any way we want. We can make Kirk Cousins the best quarterback in NFC if we take the stats in a certain way. We can slant them any way we want. So here comes my question to you guys. Today in the NFL, what is more important, stats or wins?
Depends on who's on your fantasy football team.
Yeah, there you go.
You want to win your fantasy football. That's the only thing I could think of. It's, obviously for the teams themselves, it's the wins. They could care less about the stats. Certain players feel differently about that. They always want to get their numbers because they want to get their numbers, or else they don't get their bonuses and things like that. And of course, anybody who plays fantasy football is always going to want the stats, and they don't care about the players.
Yeah, I'm sure, Pax, when you leave the stadium after an Eagle game, the first thing the fans want to know are the stats. That's what they're talking about. What running back ran for X amount of yards, how many receptions a receiver got. Oh, and by the way, the Eagles won or lost the game. That comes into play later on. So, of course, it's the stats. That's what fans care about most.
Well, Jack laughs at that. But contracts, as Pac said, is based off stats more than wins. You could tell with the recent contract given to Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert's been in the league 3 years. He's going to be a great quarterback as long as he doesn't get hurt. Everything works out for him. He might be a future Hall of Famer. I don't know. Point is, he hasn't won one playoff game yet.
What the question is what the fans care more about, not what the player cares more about. What fans care more about.
It says,
and it's kind of ridiculous to think that fans would care more about stats than how their team is doing. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous, except the only way it comes into play, if it's, let's say, an Aaron Judge has 61 homers, you want to see him get 62, break the record, then that becomes more important than the game itself, unless, of course, that game, the division title is on the line for that game, then that might be an exception. But unless it's something historical, very, very big, getting that stat, like a player's last game of the season, he's on the verge of hitting 400, that becomes more important than the game virtually every time. We're not talking players, but players' stats are their individual stats are always more important. They can say all they want to do is win. They don't care how they did. But if they don't do well individually, it doesn't matter what their team does. They're going to get hurt during contract negotiations, and they might not even be on the team. They might get cut a lesser guy. So it's the individual player. You're talking football. Take a baseball player. If he goes 0 for 4, doesn't get on base at all, his team wins, he's not going to be happy unless it's a very established player, a great play on a given day. Then he might be pleased, as long as his team won. But for the vast majority of time, for players, it's individual stats But as far as fans go, it's virtually always the team winning. It's a no-brainer, not even worth discussing.
Well, Jack, I don't necessarily agree with that all the way. I mean, we saw Derek Cole. He's the ace for the Yankees. I see all the fans. You know, he's the ace. We still lost. But they're going to talk about Derek Cole and his stats as far as striking out batters, only giving up no runs. I think they got the run after Derek Cole was taken out. But the point is, we do care about stats.
What means more to Yankee fans, them losing to the Orioles 1-0 at Garrett Cole pitching a great game and looking at his stat line? It's not even worth discussion. Yankee fans upset they lost to Baltimore. It is not even close. It's not a viable question, Mac.
Jack,
not a viable question.
It is. We care more about Aaron Judge and OPS and driving in runs, his home runs, than whether the Yankees win. I mean,
I could care less about either, so it doesn't matter to me, even a little bit. I could care less if the Yankees win or if Aaron Judge hits a home run. You know, but I do happen to care a little bit about Ohtani hitting home runs. So, I mean, when you're putting it in that type of perspective, you know what I mean? It's like so the Pirates like putting out different stats while their guys are batting. Like, hey, this guy is hitting more RBIs in the 2-hole than any other player in the National League.
Well, but what means more to the fans, winning or not? In rare cases, I agree with the stat thing. In the case of Ohtani, okay, we're watching to see whether he can break Judge's American League record, and to some people, the home run record. Ohtani's this type of mega star, but as far as Angel fans go, they have a shot at the playoffs, so they're kind of conflicted. I mean, the first thing they want to look at is how Ohtani did. They wake up in the morning, they didn't see the game. His stat line is the first thing they look at. That's very important. But in general, they don't care about stats nearly as much as their team winning. They'll look at the stat line. Yankee fans this morning, bottom line is they lost 1-0 to Baltimore. You think they care more that Garrett Cole pitched a great game? They acknowledge it. They respect it. They're happy to see him do well. But they're upset. If the Yankees won 1-0 and Garrett Cole pitched a poor game, Yankee fans would be happy this morning because they beat Baltimore. They're in the playoff hunt.
I listen. Contracts are based off stats and not wins as much as people say. Again, I'm going to go back to Herbert because this really bothers me. You've got he's young. You've got Jalen Hurts who helped take his team to the Super Bowl, and I think he came out. Well, he's been with the Eagles 3 years, as long as Herbert's been with the Chargers. He's gone to the Super Bowl. Herbert right now is getting paid more than Jalen Hurts. Now I know it's up to the owner what you pay. But
that's also done very specifically. The Eagles went out of their way to get the contract done with Hurts. That's why they wanted to make him the first one. Give him the most amount of money that everybody else go above.
I'm going to be honest. We're going off topic, but it is a good topic to talk a little about. To just compare Jalen Hurts to Justin Herbert, I bet if you had 10 GMs in the room, every GM in the NFL, and they needed a quarterback. They needed a quarterback to fill in the position. And I love Jalen Hurts. I loved him in college. I still do. The vast majority of GMs, or at least the majority, would pick Justin Herbert over Jalen Hurts. Whether he's a better quarterback or not, ultimately how it's going to turn out, time's going to tell. The majority of GMs would pick Justin Herbert, feeling he has a little more upside, it's just the way it is. You might not do it, but the majority would.
Do you believe that, Bag? Do you think the majority would take Justin Herbert over Jalen Hurts?
No, not right now, especially after the body of work. I think that Herbert has definitely some good attributes, but also has some deficiencies. And when you look at the two quarterbacks, I think that Hurts has proven to be the better quarterback. Now, can I say that is going to be that over the course of their careers? No. But at the moment, I would definitely have to give the edge more to Hurts than Herbert. I mean, let's say Herbert made it to the playoffs finally last year. First 2 years he didn't make it. Hurts
Eagles had
started like.
blocking. Chargers didn't have blocking. The Eagles had.
Hold on, but
good
is that my
offensive
fault? Is
line.
that
The Chargers
anybody's
didn't.
fault? Is that anybody's
No, but
fault?
there's a difference in
But listen,
balance.
but you no playoffs, no ticky, no washy. You know what I mean? And they had the chance to do it, and you could blame the coach for not playing for the tie when they both would have made it in. Nope, you want to call a timeout, and
The
then
Eagles have a better team. Take both guys and flip-flop their teams. Put Hurts on the Chargers, Herbert on the Eagles. I don't know whether the Eagles go to the Super Bowl then with Justin Herbert as their quarterback. I can't say for sure what would have happened, but the Eagles have a better team than the Chargers, a clearly better team if you eliminate the quarterbacks.
Listen, isn't the job of the quarterback to elevate the team, right? That's the job of the quarterback. Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, your team may not be as good as the other team, but your job as that franchise quarterback is to elevate your team to win those games.
And he elevated them into the playoffs. Very few quarterbacks would have gotten the Chargers into the playoffs.
very few. You
I
think?
don't know.
I don't know.
Jack.
Exactly. I think that Herbert has some deficiencies, and those deficiencies are part of the reason why they didn't make it in the playoffs before last year. And then last year, when they went to the playoffs, they got knocked out in the first round.
Would you say that Jalen Hurts is a better athlete than Herbert?
I would.
They're not playing tennis, Mac. He's a better athlete. They're not. Come on. I mean, it's not about an athlete. And Lamar Jackson, I could say, is the best quarterback in the NFL. He strikes me as the best athlete. He might not be. We don't know who the best athlete really is. Just because someone can run quick and they have a powerful.
I watched the games, Jack. I could make a judgment on
who's the best athlete quarterback.
Best athlete quarterback right now in the league. I'd have to go with Hurts.
What about Josh Allen? Lamar Jackson?
Josh Allen's good. Josh
Allen likes to throw too many picks.
That's quarterbacking more than an athlete. But I listen. I think Justin Herbert is going to be, barring injury, barring the San Diego Chargers falling apart. I keep calling them San Diego. The LA Chargers falling apart. I think Justin Herbert's going to be a great quarterback. I just don't know that he's the best quarterback in the league. And normally your contract is based off where your pecking order is in the league at your position.
Mac, the way you do business, you don't risk losing Justin Herbert. If Justin Herbert's going to be the type of quarterback you think he's going to be, and the Chargers feel the same way you do, so you're on the same page with the LA Chargers. They're projecting they want this to have him around for years, 5-year extension, and they're paying him as the type of quarterback they think he's going to be. If you don't pay him that money and he has a great year this year, then where does that leave you? The price is just going to go up, but he might decide, look, they didn't sign me when they had a chance. I want to go elsewhere. I don't like the direction that this team is headed in. And you better believe there'll be a number of teams that would give him the money the Chargers are giving him now without hesitation. So you make the deal when you can. You just don't wait. That was my argument with the Yankees and the Aaron Judge contract. Make the deal when you can earlier. The Atlanta Braves in baseball have shown us the blueprint by signing guys early, not letting them get anywhere close to free agency. If you have faith, you have a great player, you go for it. I know what you're saying. Justin Herbert has to do a little more to show he's worth that contract. But contracts are based a lot of times on potential moving forward. And that's what the Chargers are looking at. And Pax is right with Jalen Hurts. The Eagles smartly got in front of the situation. They decided without a doubt they want Jalen Hurts to be their quarterback of the future. But I'll tell you this, guys. Justin Herbert has a better body of work than Jalen Hurts. And case in point, since they've come in the league, case in point, the Eagles didn't know for sure until last season, as the season went along, that Jalen Hurts would definitely be their quarterback of the future because he didn't fully come of age until last year. And now they see he did, and now they're putting their full faith in him the way that they should. But they weren't sure a year ago.
Okay, I could partially agree with that. And listen, again, Jalen Hurts to me is the number 2 quarterback in all NFL right now. That's just my opinion. You could argue Burrows, you could argue a bunch of quarterbacks. I'm just saying, in my opinion, I think Jalen Hurts is the number 2 quarterback in the NFL. I think Justin Herbert is maybe closer to top 6 or so. I think he's got a lot to prove, and that's all I'm saying.
Mac, but if I tell you that Jalen Hurts has the best 1-2 wide receiver group in the NFL, I could make that argument. Arguably, he does.
Sure.
You know,
Sure you could. But you still got to perform. So let's get on.
Absolutely.
Let's get on to the 76ers. Always a hot button with James Harden. To me, no doubt he's a Hall of Famer. If you were his advisor, now Jack doesn't like to answer these questions, but I'm going to make him. If you were his advisor, and he's got all the money he could ever want, he's probably never going to win a championship. A lot of great players in the NBA history have never won a championship. Do you just say, hey, take your money, take some self-respect, stop trying to force your way out of Philadelphia, and just retire? You're not what you used to be. You're still a good basketball player, but you're not the James Harden of old. Just retire. What do you think, Jack? Do you think you would advise him to do that?
If it was a box, I would, Max, because there are consequences of fighting too long. What does he have to lose playing too long? How do you ask a guy to walk away from $35 million? It's what he wants to do. If James Harden was cheating the game, cheating the team, not being in good physical condition, not working out, just showing up, grabbing his money, showing no pride whatsoever, maybe you have to sit down and have that discussion with him. Like, why are you doing this? You have all the money you're ever going to need. Your heart's not into this. Then maybe you do that. No advisor is really going to advise anything because these advisors usually do get a small cut, I think, unless it's a friend just talking heart to heart. Why should he do it? As long as he wants to play the game. And even if his heart's not fully into it, it's $35 million. And no matter how much money you have, you always want more money. Think of what you can do with money like that. What else are you going to do for that season? You're going to go to Cancun. You're going to hang out on the beach. You're going to do this, do that. No, if he wanted to retire and just had no desire to play, fine, that's his decision. I certainly wouldn't advise him to walk away from something like that. I wouldn't even advise him to walk away from $1 million if he truly wanted to play. Okay? But the money's enormous, and you can't advise him something like that. It's got to come from him. He doesn't need anyone telling him to retire.
But Jack, is a question of his integrity or his place in the NBA. Right now, he's disrupting the Philadelphia 76ers. He's got the Clippers who really they don't know if they want him or not. He's a big problem for the 76ers right now, Pags. If you could talk to James Harden right now, what would you tell
him? To be honest, I really wouldn't know what to tell him. You know what I mean? Because first off, that's the problem. You can't tell him anything. That's half of the problem. Stop crying and play basketball. Maybe if you were the guy that you used to be, you would be able to get all the money that you want and go anywhere you want to go. But you ain't LeBron. In fact, you ain't even like Andre Drummond anymore. You know what I mean? It's like
he's better than Andre Drummond now. No, don't go that
his stock has plummeted. And even though he still has some left in the tank where he shows it one every 12 or 15 games, he's still a shell of himself. So, I mean, get your money, do whatever you want to do. I mean, because you're going to do whatever you want to do. And, so long. After the season, bye. You know what I mean? But if I was Morey, I would not go out of my way to try to trade him. You either show up to camp or you don't. And he's in that last year of his contract. So the truth of the matter is that he's got to show up and play, because if he doesn't show up, that means the Sixers could still retain his rights.
Well, what happened when he was with Houston? He wanted to be traded. He showed up to preseason and all because he didn't want to lose his money, but he came overweight. I didn't like that lack of professionalism he showed. The Sixers have a problem with James Harden. They would deal him if they could get value in return. They can't really get meaningful value in return, so they're actually better keeping him 1 year. He's no longer a great player, but he's a good player. That's all he is now, a good player. So you're better off keeping a good player who can start for you, run the offense, still gives you a chance to win. If the Sixers run it back, and it looks like they're going to have to run it back because I don't see any type of meaningful deals they could make. They could maybe tweak the team before the season, but that's about it. They have a chance of going to the finals still. They weren't that far away. They lost in 7 games to the Celtics, who lost in 7 games to the Miami Heat, who went to the finals. In other words, if things can bounce right for the Sixers, if the guys they have can just play well, they do have a shot. I mean, it's not far-fetched to think that they can go to the finals. I don't think they will, but it's not out of reach is what I'm trying to say. But if they trade James Harden to the LA Clippers where he wants to go, and they don't get anything meaningful in return, and I don't see what they would get meaningful in return, forget about it. I mean, that chance of advancing in the playoffs is virtually gone.
Do you want an unhappy player on your team, though? I mean, listen, why I say this is James Harden right now has been with, 3-4 teams in the last 3-4 years. It looks like he's trying to chase a championship. A lot of players have done that. Karl Malone, I think Payton did that for Gary Payton did that too. And some players just don't ever get a championship. Carmelo Anthony, I don't think he got a championship. He was chasing the dream for a while at the end there. I don't know if he's retired or not.
I think Carmelo was just trying to have a job in the NBA. He was never serious. No, all fairness. I mean, he did win an NCAA title at Syracuse, so he showed he could win in that element.
So anyway, all I'm saying is that, listen, he can do what he wants. He probably will do what he wants. If I was his friend, I say, listen, you look desperate. You're creating a problem with your own team that you requested to go to. Just take your money right off of the sunset. When the Hall of Fame is ready to announce your name, be there. Maybe people will forget, these last few years of your career. I mean, there's only so much, Jack. There's only so much. He hasn't
embarrassed him. No, Mac, I don't think James Harden has embarrassed himself at all. I don't think so. Take last year, he was a good player. I think he led the league in assists even though I think assists is an overrated stat. He's not embarrassing himself. If he was embarrassing himself with his play on the court, yeah, perhaps I wouldn't want to see him out there. I would have a talk with him. How much does the money mean to you? $35 million, Mac. $35 million. Even if, let's say, a guy has $300 million in the bank, $35 million is an awful lot.
Yeah. I don't know, Pags. Listen, I think I'm not talking about his play embarrassed. The way he's going about business right now is what's embarrassing to me. So I don't know what you think.
And
I will forgive him.
He what?
He comes back to the Sixers. Pags will forgive him. The Sixer fans will forgive him.
I love it when he puts words in my mouth.
Well, you're telling me you'd hold it against them?
I mean, I'm not a big fan of James Harden in the first place. So it's not like it's any love gained or lost. If he plays on this team, great. At least we still got something back from our whole Ben Simmons debacle.
Let me tell you something. The problem with Pags, Mac, he takes Joel Embiid's feelings for granted. He thinks Joel Embiid is just happy to be a Sixer for life. Case closed. He better worry about the Sixers making Joel Embiid happy, because Joel Embiid is starting to show a tiny bit of discontent. He would like to be a Sixer for his career, Embiid, but if he doesn't feel they have a good chance to win the championship, he might want out, the way you pointed out a moment ago, Mac, about players chasing, a championship. And Embiid's in the prime of his career. He might want to go that route eventually. When you mentioned Gary Payton, Karl Malone, they were towards the end of their career, so they became a little desperate for that ring. And Embiid is in his prime right now. So he's not quite desperate, but he's getting very edgy. And Pags is taking that for granted, because Pags is going to wake up one morning and see the headlines that Embiid wants out. And then Pags is going to start kissing Embiid's butt at that point.
Hey, listen, just because you've got like this big dome that you don't see any hair on doesn't mean you got any brains in there. Because it doesn't matter to me whether Embiid stays on this team or not anymore. I don't think this is a championship caliber team, and that's the problem. So it doesn't matter whether Embiid has got Harden next to him or he's got Now if he had Jimmy Butler next to him, then I'd say that that's a caliber team, but it's not. He doesn't, and that's the problem. So ultimately, we're not going to win a championship, and whether Embiid's here or not, it's not going to make a bit of difference. That's the problem.
You mentioned something interesting, Pax. If the Sixers decided to do a complete do-over and trade Embiid, can you imagine the draft choices they would get back in return? But would the fans rebel? That would be the thing. Even though the Sixers would get an enormous haul back.
I think that I mean, rebel. That's kind of hard. That's like a harsh word to use. I think that they would take umbrage. You know what I mean? They would have issue with it. It's like we were to trust the process, and the process wound up doing nothing. You know what I mean? It's like we're still trusting the process. I was done trusting the process 2 years ago. When they blew it against Atlanta, which really they should have won that series and probably could have won the NBA, won the finals that year. But again, they couldn't get away from themselves, and the whole thing with, Ben Simmons. So now they're stuck.
Ben Simmons, the gift that keeps giving. So let's turn to football real quick. And when Aaron Rodgers wanted out of Green Bay, there were a few teams that really wanted Aaron Rodgers. The Raiders wanted Rodgers. Tampa Bay was talking about Rodgers. And the best fit looked out there when he was out there looking to be traded was the San Francisco 49ers. Already built to go to a championship. All they needed was that one great quarterback to put him over the top. If Rodgers went to San Francisco at the time of that was a couple of years ago, I think the 49ers would have been the favorites to go to the Super Bowl. Them and the Eagles, I think the 49ers might have been favored over the Eagles to win the Super Bowl if Rodgers went there. Instead, he picks the Jets. Now, there was another quarterback that picked the Jets. He got hurt, but when he wasn't hurt, the Jets were winning. His name was Brett Favre. And I believe Aaron Rodgers going to the Jets has much to do with Brett Favre as it does with him winning the Super Bowl with the Jets. And Jack, you're a Jets fan. Do you think that's ridiculous or maybe true?
you make a point which conspiracy theories, they think of stuff like that. They dig stuff up, and it's fun to think of something like that because I hadn't given it any thought. Well, Brett Favre came to the Jets for 1 year. Even though they had a winning record, they were 9-7. It didn't quite work out. And if Aaron Rodgers comes to the Jets and wins a Super Bowl, he one-ups Brett Favre. But it doesn't have anything to do with that because he replaced Brett Favre as the Packer quarterback and won a Super Bowl. There was a Super Bowl MVP. So any lingering thoughts that he could somehow be in Brett Favre's shadow disappeared with that Packer Super Bowl victory. Plus, if you ask, consensus is, I think at least, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, who was the greater quarterback. You could say it's very close. And some people are going to say Brett Favre was a little better. I would think slightly more people would rate Aaron Rodgers ahead of Brett Favre. If you talk about all-time great quarterbacks, it's just my opinion. I'd like to hear other people's opinion. You and Pags, who you would put ahead of who, but I think a tiny edge belongs to Aaron Rodgers. And he wasn't really in the shadow with Brett Favre anymore. Jordan Love has Aaron Rodgers' shadow, to deal with. But if Jordan Love wins a Super Bowl with the Green Bay Packers, he's no longer in the shadow. It disappears for good. And you won't be able to say years later, well, Jordan Love is trying to get out of his shadow. So no, but that theory is interesting, Mac. Now that you bring it up, Favre did go to the Jets. Rodgers is going to the Jets too. But I don't think it even really entered his mind when he decided he wanted to go to the Jets. I think what he saw was a first-rate, defense. He liked the idea coming to the big city because if you win one Super Bowl with the Jets, it's like winning one nowhere else because the Jet fans are thirsting for it. You become a New York icon, and there's so few of those. I mean, this isn't Philly we're talking about. This is New York. I mean, you win it here, man, oh man, you're bigger than life. And I think Aaron Rodgers understands that. And to take the pay cut he took, close to $35 million, it's like, it just shows you his resolve.
Bags, I don't know about some of the stuff Jack said there, but I mean, I get it. Jets haven't won a Super Bowl in a long time. I think that's one of the reasons Favre came to the Jets. If he won a Super Bowl for the first time since Namath, he would have been, the talk of New York. I think that Favre, and I'm going to use the San Francisco argument again. He had a great defense, great running game, good receivers. He's got the weapons in San Francisco. Yet he chooses to go to a team that was still rebuilding. And at 7-9, they weren't even in the playoffs. So do you think maybe there's something to this that maybe Aaron Rodgers, Jack says he's not in the shadow. I kind of disagree with it. I think he is. I think he's still won one Super Bowl like Brett Favre did. The stats are pretty similar at this time in his career as it was Brett's. Brett even goes to the championship with the Vikings. I mean, do you think that maybe Favre has something that he wants to prove to himself and to the fans that he's good or better than Brett Favre?
I personally don't think so. I think that, listen, as an athlete in this day and age, you need to motivate yourself more than you do anything else. So, I think the motivation of trying to win a championship is what motivates him, and it has nothing to do with Brett Favre. I think that the trajectories of their careers have similar, paths because of the Jets. But, and the truth of the matter is that who knows what's happening when he goes down to Costa Rica and he gets under the ayahuasca and he starts doing that and what he thinks and the hours of dark or the days of darkness and stuff like that where he's doing all that fun stuff. I mean, let's face it. He's a strange bird in general. You know what I mean? And it's like, and that all rivals how strange a bird that Favre is, or at least that he has a strange bird that he likes to show to people. That's either way, it was not. They have very similar stance on things. To be honest, the Jets ain't going to win a Super Bowl, and it don't matter who they got and how much money he gives up. He could pay for nothing, and they still ain't going to win a Super Bowl. Unfortunately, Jack, you're going to still be crying at the end of this year and next year, and then not have a quarterback again. So
no, he's staying, and especially if the Jets get Dalvin Cook, look out. But that's another issue. We're going to discuss that in the coming weeks, where we think the teams are going to come up. Mac, you mentioned Favre went to a championship with the Vikings. No, he went to the NFC Championship game. Aaron Rodgers went to the NFC Championship game a number of times with the Packers, where they came up short, in that particular game. So the Packers have been a perennial playoff team under Aaron Rodgers. So don't make it seem like, well, Brett Favre, when he left the Packers, he won a championship. Let's see, can Aaron Rodgers do it? Brett Favre did not go to another Super Bowl after he left the Packers.
I didn't say that. I said he went to the NFL Championship with the Vikings.
You said he went to the championship, which, right. And if you don't specify it's NFC or AFC, people are going to think, well, it's the Super Bowl.
Well, I think the Vikings people know are the NFC, Jack, but maybe not. And to a point there, Favre took a heck of a beating against the Saints, who won the Super Bowl that year, and they barely lost that game. If Favre goes to the Super Bowl with the Vikings and wins, and the Vikings have never won a Super Bowl, wow.
I agree.
Would that have lifted his standards?
Yeah, you're right. Favre played a really great game, except he threw a silly interception at the end of that game. And unfortunately, people tend to remember the one bad play. Favre had maybe the best year of his career with the Vikings, arguably. I'm not saying he did, but arguably he had a great year with Minnesota. I mean, and if Rodgers could have the same type of year with the Jets that Favre had with Minnesota, I mean, it puts the Jets in a good position. But you know what it is with the NFL, guys? There's so much parity going on. I heard the other day one of the talk shows talking about the Eagles. Can they match their 13-4 record again? 14-3, record again this year? And the consensus was the schedule is just too tough. There's just too much parity that the Eagles can still win their division, but you're looking more like 11-6 and 12-5. It's going to be enormously hard to go 14-3 again.
I don't know about parity, because if we were playing a different divisions, if the NFC East was playing the South or the North, I think they would say to see the same records. It's just we got stuck with the AFC East this year, and it's in the South I think we're playing too, if I'm not mistaken, or the West if I'm not mistaken. I'm not really sure about that, the other division we're playing, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to. And that may affect the wild cards too. I've been talking the Giants are going to get in the wild card and the Cowboys, but you look at Detroit and Minnesota and Seattle, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to see all three NFC East teams get in there again.
Well, two teams, Pax, who've been traditionally bad over the years, they made the playoffs last year, and chances are they're even going to be better this year, and that's the Lions and the Seahawks. So you add them to the traditional teams that are always usually in the mix. You talk about parity like we've never seen before.
It's going to be a very.
I tell you, and I'm going to give my little hot take here. Seattle is where we thought they were last year. Seattle takes a big nosedive. I gave a lot of respect last year to them for the fact that we thought they were going to stink, and they wound up being a playoff team. And they wind up beating Detroit out of the playoffs by 1 point. But I'm telling you, Seattle takes a nosedive this year. Where they were last year, and where they are this year where we thought they were last year.
Last year, we thought they'd be one of the worst teams in the NFL.
And I think this year they are going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL.
They drafted great. the last couple of years. I mean, Seattle is. I mean, they look like they're going.
You guys always think that I'm wrong with my predictions, but I always seem to be right. I'm always the one saying I told you so.
I gotta admit, I do gotta give Pags credit here when you talk about sports. Mac, me and you were talking about the Mets being contenders, and Pags just laughed at us. He said they always Mets it up. And he's right. He just laughed at the idea of the Mets being a serious World Series contender. He went on the limb before the year. He basically said to us, the Mets are a joke. Come on, guys. He brushed it off. And look at them. If a few games under 500, they're selling. They look like they're going to throw in the towel. I mean, who knows what will happen.
So, let's talk about that for a half a second, because I know how much of a Mets fan you are, and I love it when the Mets.
I'm a Yankees fan.
Yeah, but we talked about how he was going to spend $500 million, and he just about did. And what did that buy him?
But look at the San Diego Padres, all their big name players, Soto, Machado, Tatis, Bogarts, the money that they're laying out. I mean, those are 4 impact players who might potentially could be Hall of Famers, someday. Certainly in the case of Machado, he's on the verge of it. But
egos. This is the problem. Egos.
Yeah. Listen, you got to have chemistry to win anything.
And it's interesting. I just want to say about the Padres, about possibly being sellers. They got Juan Soto, who might be the best position player available in baseball to trade. They've got, Blake Snell, who might be the best starter who's going to be available on the trade market. And they got Josh Hader, who could be the best reliever available. They're thinking of those 3 guys maybe making deals for. Can you imagine the amount of first-rate prospects they could get back trading those 3 if they want to go in a rebuild?
Yeah. Like I said, I still believe Soto goes up 100 miles to Anaheim. I think that's where you're going to see Soto be at. He's going to wind up getting traded to the Angels, and the Angels are going to make a run this year more than they ever have. And I think that's they need a guy like Soto, and they're not going to be able to pay him after the contract. But it's absolutely worth it to try to make the run and give up those assets right now and get the extra bat to be able to protect both Ohtani and Trout.
Well, that's very interesting. And to finish up with Rogers, when Rogers retires, Jack, him and Brett Favre will have some kind of podcast that they'll do together, called "Not Living in Rogers and Brett Favre's Shadow." That's going to be the name of the podcast. So that's going to be a very interesting podcast to watch. And
maybe they'll call it "Chasing the Magic Man," Magikowski.
It could. August 8th, I think, is the YouTube special with Aaron Rodgers, starring Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, and I imagine
Hard Knocks,
and I imagine Jack will be watching that. So.
Absolutely, yeah.
So Jack, let's talk a little bit about hype in sports. Some sports are hyped up. We've seen some Super Bowls that were hyped up and they were terrible. Some NBA championships, the same. Some players that came in as rookies were hyped up and never really made it. What do you think, if we're not counting wrestling, is a sport that has more hype than substance?
Boxing. I mean, occasionally you get a great fight. Occasionally a great main event, like tonight, Terrence Crawford against Errol Spence. That's not being overhyped. Both of them unbeaten, great fighters throughout their career. That's a genuine mega event to me. But boxing most of the time. I mean, you get a so-so matchup and then the fighters start insulting one another. The public catches on. You look at the Pacquiao-Mayweather fight. The guy signed to fight 5 years too late. And it was so overhyped. People were having like Super Bowl type parties the night of the fight. And then it wasn't a good fight even. It was a tame decision in Mayweather's favor and people were complaining. And what are they complaining about? Boxing is basically an overhyped sport. You get some great fights, but it's the hype. That's why fighters insult one another just about all the time because they're trying to build the event up. I mean, you don't hear players in other sports for the most part insulting one another. Before the Super Bowl, you didn't hear the Eagles saying, "Oh, Patrick Mahomes is overrated. He's this, he's that." You know, the coaches won't allow that type of hype to go on. They show a certain healthy respect. So boxing's the most overhyped sport of all. My sport's the most overhyped one.
You agree with that, Pags?
I do agree with that. However, I'm going to add to that away from the national championship, the NCAA football national championship. Usually, now that the playoffs are here, the playoff games have been better than the national championship in general. You know what I mean? The national championship usually is a blowout, and it's, the games leading up to it are the good games. So that's kind of where I feel like that's the only thing that I can really, compare in the grand scheme of things with, anything else. Like, it's just like, I don't boxing, I believe, is way overhyped. I mean, when you guys talked about this fight tonight being on the same league or in the same arena as Hagler and Hearns, I'm like, no way. Because, I mean, I'm a sports fan, and I talk to you guys, and if Jack wasn't on this show, I'd be willing to bet I would not have heard of either one of these boxers, because boxing doesn't have the allure that it used to have. When the biggest fight that I know of, me personally, is Jake Paul versus Diaz. Is that his name? Again, now that's just me. Now, I ain't a boxing aficionado, but the fight that's a real fight, that this may be a real fight tonight, in comparison to the exhibition of Jake Paul again, or the last big fight that I probably even watched was McGregor versus what's his face? You know what I mean? So I mean, it was like that I went through hell and high water to try to get that on a TV. You know what I mean? Just so that I could watch that fight. I can't agree enough that boxing is way overhyped than the sport itself. But
not tonight's fight. Not tonight's fight. Tonight, if you're a fan, this is a great fight. So, but I see a point for the average sports fan who's not a boxing fan. They relate it more to, let's say, Hagler and Hearns. Something about them. The average sports fan related more to them than Crawford and Spence. But Jake Paul, he fought this novice, Tommy Fury. It did great business. Why? Tommy Fury was a novice, fighter, novice professional. But because Jake Paul's a YouTube star, they fight a regular boxing match. And it created excitement because of the hype, not because of the substance, because of the hype.
Yeah, Fury being Tyson Fury's brother, that had a lot to do with it.
Yeah,
big name.
That added to it. Yeah, with the hype.
Jack, do you think that Muhammad Ali is partly to blame for all the overhype in boxing? I mean, he was the one that was out there pounding the pavement in front of the cameras, belittling some fighters, making fighters fights bigger in some cases than they really were. Do you think he's part to blame?
Jack answers, I want to throw an interjection here real quick. Boxing is to blame for boxing. Too many fingers in pie. Too many people wanting to make their money, and money. Money owns boxing. It's too many chiefs, not enough Indians, and that's the problem with boxing. Say they need to have one governing body. You could have all these belts or whatever, but they need to have really one governing body. And while there's too many, there's going to be way too much, gray matter in the mix of this. You can go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, you're correct, Pax, in what you're saying, but it has to be a governing body that would do the right thing. You have four of them now who, for the most part, are self-serving, because if they have their own champions, they get their 3% sanctioning fee by having their own champion over there. And they obviously, if you get a mega attraction who's going to generate more money, that 3% means more revenue coming into the sanctioning body. It's the promoters too. They just want to make fights with their fighters under their promotional banner because they get to keep all the money that way. They don't have to split the pie up with another promoter. Now, Spence and Crawford, there was too much money in the pot for the fight not to be made. So in a case like that, people are going to compromise and come together. Quick question. I mentioned this on the past show. To show you how boxing's overhyped, the biggest sports event of all time, the first Ali Frazier fight, the fight of the century. When did that take place? What day, what night of the week?
Wasn't it on a Monday, Jack? Or
You got it, man. It was on a Monday. Can you imagine the biggest fight possible today taking place on a Monday night? We laugh about it. Monday night? But Ali Frazier was on a Monday night.
I disagree with that. The right fight should be done on a Monday night because everybody is home paying attention to that. Like that's like Monday Night Football. That's why Monday Night Football typically has the best ratings of all the football games when there's a good football game. I think that a Monday night boxing match could do something like that. Like, again, I remember watching Hagler Hearns fight because it was on the Wide World of Sports. You know, those were the things that
was the replay. It was closed circuit. It was on a weeknight when they actually.
Yeah, but I remember watching that on Wide. I was young then. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I may not have watched the original fight, but a lot of people still watch that fight on the Wide World of Sports. Yeah. You know, and them coming into that stadium. It was an outdoor stadium, was it not?
No, yeah, in Vegas, yeah, by Caesar's Palace, yeah.
Speaking of hype, Crawford Spence weigh-in. We've got, was it Jack Caleb Smith punching Charlo in the face?
No, Caleb Plant. You know, that's how they make fights. Jamal Charlo, the one with an A, he turned on the fight with Canelo, and his twin brother's younger brother, Jamel, is taking the fight. He's had some problems, it seems, outside of the ring. Hasn't fought in a couple of years. Caleb Plant, a so-so fighter, good fighter, but nothing special by a long shot at all. He's very ordinary. Is looking to get a big fight, be relevant. So how do you stay relevant? You keep your name in the news. You take a cheap shot at someone else. You hit him. Now they talk about a feud. Plant and Charlo let him fight. Was it staged beforehand? It could have been. My guess is it wasn't. And that's the hype of boxing. Great example, Mac. You're talking about it, Mac. You were sucked into the hype, Mac. Yes. Great example. Great question about this with the hype and all. And now you know, people are going to want to watch it. Wow, because they have a feud going on. Good job, Mac, of pointing out the hype. That's exactly it.
Last question for today, guys. And I think we've asked this in the past, but it's always fun debating this. Who is the biggest NFL draft bust ever? And there are a few. And let's start with we haven't started with Pags. Let's start with Pags. Pags, who to you is the biggest NFL bust?
Ryan Leaf.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
That's the first person that comes to my mind. I mean, there's been other ones, you know what I mean, that can fill that number, but like I think about that as Ryan Leaf is the first one that comes to my head.
Yeah, he's the first one, Mac, that comes to people's head. But I don't like the question. I don't like to demean guys as being a bust. Some guys get drafted high, but they're not as good as we thought they were going to be. I mean, Ryan Leaf, a lot of his problem was his personality, his maturity. You know, he was like about to get into a fight with a reporter when he's a rookie, and Junior Seau has to come in and push him back. You know, he comes to camp, you're looking at a young, great quarterback who would be a leader, and it was a toss-up who should go first, him or Peyton Manning that year. You know, you look at someone like a Johnny Manziel. Why didn't he have a job in the NFL? Why didn't he last? I mean, that's a big disappointment. I mean, yes. And then I'm reading a book now on the history of the Jets, believe it or not. I got my library card, guys, after more than 20 years, new neighborhood, and I look at books, and I see a book, History of the Jets. And it makes you recall the old players like Blair Thomas, came from your territory, Penn State, picked very highly. They thought he'd be a great running back in the NFL, and he didn't work out. And you think of Brian Bosworth, guys, the Boz, big star. He didn't quite, work out, even though he had a number of years in the league. And if I'm not mistaken, then Brian Bosworth may have played like 8 years in the NFL, and he may make a Pro Bowl team 1 year. If I'm not mistaken, on there, he did have a little longevity there. So maybe that's not being a bust. But I don't like that, because some guys it's not their fault. They just turn out not to be that good. And it's kind of cruel to call someone a bust. It's hurtful.
Well, Ryan Leaf was a bust, and it was a maturity guy. The reason I went with Johnny Manziel is because Johnny Manziel was actually called Johnny Football, right? He was the hottest thing coming out of college, and he just didn't try. He was out partying in Vegas. He was drinking. He was carrying on. It was like I don't know what he thought. I know he was from a rich family. He stayed trying to get in football in different leagues, but he always had the same problem as he just thought he could walk into anywhere and just be quarterback. And I think that Manziel might have been able to be a decent quarterback, maybe a Baker Mayfield kind of quarterback. Not great, but good enough to win. And he just didn't care. And that's why I picked him as the biggest bust, because I think he had the tools to be good, but he just I just remember watching him always in the limelight, always carrying on, and just never, not reporting to camp. I think it was the Browns that drafted him first too. The Cowboys wanted him, if I remember correctly. And
Jerry Jones wanted him. No. This is a story I want to tell, Mac. I'm glad you brought that up. Jerry Jones wanted Johnny Manziel to be a Cowboy in the worst way, because he played college football in Texas. He's an icon in Texas. And when it came time to draft Johnny Manziel, his son Stephen Jones, who has a lot of influence, and the rest of the Cowboy staff wanted Zach Martin, the great guard out of college. And Jerry Jones went across the room and asked everyone who they wanted, wanting to get someone to back him up. And they were all saying no, they wanted Zach Martin. And finally, he was annoyed at his son, Stephen. He said, Stephen, you have to take a chance to try to be great. And they wouldn't give in. And they wound up drafting Zach Martin, because they wouldn't allow Jerry Jones's emotions to take over. And Jerry Jones, to his credit, didn't push the issue to overrule them, even though he was pretty ticked off.
Jack, I guess Rick wants to buy you a drink at Turning Stone.
So, I mean, on Hall of Fame weekend, Rick, the second weekend next June, I'll be there for the Boxing Hall of Fame induction. It's kind of far for me to get to the Turning Stone. I can meet up with you there.
So thank you, David. So real quick updates before we leave, guys. The injury to Burrows is a little more significant than they thought. He'll be out for 6 weeks at least. And they'll the contract's coming up. We talked about that, Jack. What do you do if you're an owner? Do you make him the highest paid football player in football if he's injury? It's going to be interesting to see what they do with Burrows. Miami's cornerback, I'm trying to remember his name. I can't.
Jalen Ramsey.
Thank you, Ramsey. He's going to be out at least till December, they're saying. So that's going to be something to watch as far as the Dolphins go, who some are picking maybe to take a Super Bowl run this year. So that's going to be interesting. Delvin Cook is in New York right now, going to visit with the Jets. We'll see what happens, whether he signs with the Jets or he takes up in Miami. It's going to be interesting. Of course, it'll make Jets a little bit better with him.
They got $35 million to spend now.
They do. I'm hearing that DeAndre, the Raiders wide receiver, wants to go play with Aaron Rodgers in New York again. Everybody wants to go to New York Jets now.
Devontae Adams wants a reunion.
Yes. So anyway, there you go. A lot of players still upset with the running back position and market, and that'll be probably going on all year. So, guys, thanks for coming in, Pags. Great job producing. Jack, good thoughts. Everybody, thanks for all the comments and joining us. And we'll see you tomorrow on the Mac and Jack and Jim this week in sports, which will be going to the big football show the following week. And so we'll see you tomorrow, guys. And folks, have a great day.
Have a good one, guys.